through life, even if you have mentally blocked that out, if something triggers that and your brain gets that same physiological response, that's when you start getting those anxiety attacks and you start going through depressions, because the only thing your brain knows is that this feels the same.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Radiant Women. I am so excited for my next guest. I have been looking for someone to talk about this forever. Her name is Corinna Dunn. She's an experienced registered yoga teacher. Started practicing yoga in 2016 to help improve her flexibility and help her hip dysplasia after years of dancing. In 2020, after experiencing the benefits of daily yoga practice, she received her 200-hour yoga teacher certification and began teaching Vinyasa yoga, the most accessible style of power yoga. Her specialty is trauma-informed yoga, where she helps others use yoga and sound healing in healing their emotional traumas. Karina, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Now, let's just so the reason why I'm so excited, because when everyone asks me, so when it comes to healing trauma, apart from what are some of the things that we can do? And I always say things like, of course, awareness, mindfulness, and therapy are very important. But one of the things you can start doing straight away is yoga. It's that syncing of the breath and the movement that brings so much awareness to what you're feeling. And it just has not only has benefits in that moment and you feel good from doing it, but it has long-term benefits to the brain. So why don't you tell us a little bit about trauma yoga?
Absolutely. So, trauma yoga is a specified type of yoga that it specifically takes into account the sensitivities that those who have sustained trauma would possibly be dealing with. So, some of the things that we may say in a traditional yoga class, we're more mindful in our speech and in the words we use to be careful and do our best, that because we don't know every person's situation, but we're trying to do our best to meet every person where they are and not trigger or activate someone's past traumas and cause yoga to turn into yet another traumatic event for them.
Right, right. I love that. Tell us, how did you get into, I know how you got into yoga, but how did you get into trauma yoga? What drove you to that?
Well, there were a couple of factors that drove me to trauma yoga. After I originally began, taking yoga, and you said in my bio, because I was looking for natural healing for myself. I had hip dysplasia, and for those who don't know what hip dysplasia is when the cartilage between the bone and the hip, that ball of the hip joint, wears away, and there's nothing there, and there's just bone on bone just kind of rubbing together, and it can create quite a painful experience. And my
I
hip
can
was
imagine.
and so my hip was frequently popping out of place. I was in a tremendous amount of pain, and I remember when my doctor told me that I had to give up dancing, and he tried to say as gently as possible, I think you might want to find something less impactful. And when yoga was initially introduced to me, I was like, what? I don't want to do that. But, because I was used to the ebbs and flows of dancing. And, but I knew I didn't want to be in pain anymore. I knew I was tired of hurting all the time. I was tired of the hip popping in and out of place. And so I began to try it and I fell in love with yoga. And so, trauma informed yoga came from a space of myself having experienced trauma throughout my childhood and even into my adulthood, with sexual abuse and domestic violence. And I knew the importance of healing, from that inner space, because it's easy to paint on a face on the outside and say, I'm okay, I'm all good. It's so easy when on the inside we're being eaten alive almost. And I remember that was the feeling that I would often walk around with. And it also came from a space of working with children who were also traumatized. Here in the States, there's something called a CASA worker, which is a court appointed special advocate. And what we would do is for the children who had been put in the foster care system due to abuse and neglect traumas, we would go in and we would do and basically be the advocate for the children. And I saw so much trauma there, and I recognized that from the standpoint of, those children are going to be adults someday with that trauma of that pain of that lack of maternal love or paternal love. And so those two things both fueled and let me know there are so many people that are hurting, and everybody doesn't always feel comfortable going to therapy. I know when you were on my podcast you talked about how therapy is frowned on. Well, in my community, it's been frowned on for a very long time as well. It was always said in our community,
Yeah.
oh, we just pray it away. And, sometimes, listen,
Yeah.
God gave us good sense, okay? And he didn't put therapists on this planet for them to just be here.
I love that. I love, thank you so much for sharing that. That just gave me goosebumps. Um, so tell me, how has trauma helped you? Sorry, not trauma, yoga helped you within your trauma. How did you find it beneficial? And at what stage were you doing it, in terms of, um, through your healing process?
Oh, yes. Oh, it has been immensely helpful and so instrumental in my healing because there were, even when you go to a counselor, there are things when you are a victim of trauma, there are sometimes things that you're not yet ready to share, or maybe you will never be, comfortable enough to share. Because one thing about trauma victims, and I've heard them say it, and I know it to be true, being a trauma victim, is that telling the story again makes you feel like you're reliving that experience. And for me,
Yes.
not wanting to relive the experience by saying it out loud, yoga helped me to be able to heal that, be able to be in the moment, be able to feel my feelings, be able to journal those feelings, be able to use meditation and mindfulness and stillness to really help me feel those feelings, understand that those are my feelings, that's my lived experience. It's okay for me to feel it. I don't have to repeat it in order to heal it. And that has been one of the things that I found has been so helpful for myself as well as for those that I help, because sometimes saying it out loud almost re traumatizes you again, and it can cause a setback. And so for myself, using yoga to really heal and get grounded, it it just made all the difference in the world, even for me in my counseling. When I was with a counselor and I was talking, it helped me to be more comfortable to open up to my counselor and to really do some of that harder work that I was ready to do when I was in there with her.
Yes, and that's why I recommend yoga to any of my clients who are struggling, and even not, it is just so beneficial, to help you process, to help you deal. Sometimes that energy is stuck somewhere
Yes.
in our body, and we go through the healing process, and you just, like something feels off in your body, and it's through that movement, sinking of breath, stretches, that you kind of just sort of, you don't push it out, but you just, you release it.
Yes.
And that's what I love so much about yoga.
Yes, yes. And there's also, a component of the chakras that is a part of yoga and healing. And oftentimes, when there is a blockage somewhere, even like I said, when we put that mask on and we're like, oh, okay, it's all good, I'm all healed from it, you will know whether or not you're healed, because there are certain things that will give tell that particular chakra is blocked, which means you've got some more work to do over there, whether it's your root chakra or your crown chakra or your heart chakra, And so those are things that we dive into as well during my yoga practice, for that trauma informed yoga to really get deep into all of that. And a lot of people don't even realize that that's what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're just like, I just like the practice. I love it because it does, and there is research and evidence that clearly shows that the trauma is stored within the body, and even when the brain forgets the trauma, because sometimes it can happen that it can block the trauma, it's the body that remembers, and we have these reactions, pains that I guess make no sense to us.
Yes.
I have this pain in my shoulder. I haven't had my shoulder. When I go to the GP, to the doctors, they scan it. There's nothing wrong, but I have it. And, so what is going on? It's that stored trauma. And that's why yoga, therapy, meditation, mindfulness, all those things are so powerful because our past not only impacts our present and how we behave, but it impacts our body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's funny that you said something about things being stored, because and here's one way to look at it. There are certain things that will trigger the same physiological response. And so oftentimes our brains don't know the difference between, you know, a fight or flight feeling and a really good sweat session at the gym. It doesn't know the difference between the two.
Mm.
It just has the same physiological response in the brain. So you have to tell the brain what it is that it is feeling, what it is that it is interpreting. And so, yeah, when you are going through life, even if you have mentally blocked that out, if something triggers and your brain gets that same physiological response, that's when you start getting those anxiety attacks and you start going through depressions, because the only thing your brain knows is that this feels the same, not necessarily that it's the same event that has occurred.
Yes, absolutely, and you're spot on because that is essentially what a trigger is. One of our five senses being triggered to an event that has happened in the past, and our brain not knowing the difference. So, for someone who has had and that's essentially what PTSD as well is. I know when I struggled through my PTSD, I had. Trouble just being in the same room as a male.
Hmm.
It was, and again, completely safe adult, not a child anymore, but my brain knew no difference. It was, that's a scary situation, so let's just avoid that
Yes.
in, all any way possible.
Yes.
So tell me about, um, in terms of how do you do, because do you do your yoga online or what is the process? How do you help people? Um, through your practice?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So, yes, my studio is a virtual studio. The Flexible Soul Yoga online studio. It is an online platform because, during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, let me just say that, because technically we're still in the pandemic. We're just not, it's just not quite as bad.
I get you.
But there's I found that people still wanted to continue to be able to practice. And then, even being on this side of the pandemic, there are some people who are still like, hey, I'm still not as comfortable as I was before going to a gym. Or, I've just kind of found solace in practicing and not being judged. And so I just feel more comfortable practicing online. And so that was one of the reasons that I leaned toward creating a virtual online studio to where I can help people. And I have an online on demand library full of a catalog of classes that you can go through and watch. Then I have an upcoming course that's going to be starting August 22nd. Actually, it is Intro to Yoga for Emotional Healing, and it's a 6-week intensive course where we're going to get into using the principles of yoga and meditation to help you heal and really take a deep dive in and do a lot of that tough emotional work that's going to be just for you. When you journal, this is your journal. Nobody
Yeah,
has to see that. And so, but we're gonna use yoga,
right.
and they're gonna get the experience of yoga and yoga nidra and grounding yoga and trauma sensitive yoga and all of these things to help them to reset and heal their nervous systems from that trauma that they've experienced.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And speaking of the nervous system, how does yoga help regulate the nervous system? Because that's essentially what acts up when we get triggered, and when and a lot of people, us yelling at our partners or our children is a trigger.
Yes.
So we sometimes think that we trigger if we're in deep fear, but pretty much we're triggered majority of the day, every day.
Yes.
So how does yoga help with those triggers?
So, because yoga and mindfulness, and it's not, and so, okay, yoga is not just the asanas or the poses. Yoga is also the pranayama, which is the breath. And so, combined with those two things, it
Yes.
helps to calm your mind and regulate that nervous system when you're taking those deep breaths. When you are moving your body intentionally in tune with your breath, when you are getting still, listening to your body, clearing your mind, and allowing whatever happened 15 minutes ago or 8 hours ago at work, or, you know, last a little while ago with the baby when the baby was throwing food at you, whatever, you're letting that go, and you're allowing yourself to just be in the moment. And oftentimes when we're in the moment instead of being in the past moments or in the future moments, that's when our nervous systems get to rest. It gets a break. It's not in fight or flight. It's not in stress overload. It's not in hyper awareness. It's just in the moment. And that is how yoga helps to balance and give that nervous system a break.
Yes, I love that. And it's so important. I keep saying it. Stay in the present moment, because that's where the gold is, where the truth is, where everything is. And I know obviously that's hard because of our life and
Yes.
what everyone has gone through, because everyone has a story, but that's the most important thing. Tell me, in terms of now our body and our strength, how does how does yoga affect the body in terms of our health? because I think it's also important for us to understand that it doesn't just have healing effects; it also, is good for strengthening us.
Absolutely. And this is one of my favorite parts about yoga. And because that's one of the reasons why I began my yoga practice, was because it was going to strengthen my body, and that's exactly what it did for my hip. Yoga has such healing powers, and if you are doing the poses correctly, and if you're taking your time and meeting yourself where you are, understand that every single day in your practice may be different. It is for me, and I've been practicing for years. I can be flexible yesterday, but today I can come to the mat and not so much. And it's okay. It's perfectly okay. Yoga's not a
Mm.
competition. Yoga isn't for the flexible, it's for the willing to change your life through body movement and intentionality. And so, when I think about, the strength levels that my body has at 45, I know that I'm stronger at 45 than I was 10 years ago at 35, because I've become so intentional with my
Wow.
yoga practice. Like, I am so strong, and my core is strong, my legs are strong. And the stronger your body is, the less prone to injury you will be. And so I also help people who have injuries, and I help them use yoga to help to heal
Yeah.
those injuries and injury recovery. Because, listen, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't like to take pills. I don't like it. I would prefer to use more natural products if I can. And so yoga has been just that catalyst for me to help me heal and strengthen my body. My body is amazingly strong and amazingly flexible.
Wow, I love that. Tell me, where can people find out more about you? Whether they're struggling with physical pain and they want someone to help, whether they're struggling with emotional pain and they want to use yoga as a healing or use it in addition to therapy, or wherever people are, where can they find you and meet you and get the help
Oh,
they need?
absolutely. So you can find me on social media. I am all over Facebook. It's Karina Dunn Wellness on Facebook, and on Instagram it's Flexible Soul Yoga. I am also on YouTube at Flexible Soul Yoga. So out there I have free classes for people who, if they just want to get a feel for my style, or they just want to get a feel for, let's see if, want to work with this person. If this person is going to be, the type of coach that I may need, there you can go there. And and sometimes people, just because of the pandemic, people have different affordability options. And so courses that I put on YouTube the classes I put on YouTube, I put new videos up every single week, and they are short and to the point. And so that way you can continue your practice, so that until you are ready to enter into a pathway with me where you're like, hey, okay, this is something that I can afford to maintain, then, I'll just practice with you on YouTube. I do go live on YouTube and practice some days. So that's so much fun. And I also have my website, which is flexiblesoul.com. And you can find me and you will be able to work with me that way. But if you're not sure, please book a free 15-minute call so that we
Wow.
can chat.
Yes, yeah, and then that way you can help out directly as to what's the best way um, to help them go through whatever it is they're going through.
Absolutely.
Um, Karina's website and her social media will be in the description wherever you're listening or watching to this. Thank you so much for coming on. That was absolutely amazing information and amazing to know, because I think a lot of people are not aware of the benefits of yoga and how it can be complementary to so many things. It is almost a necessity to have it. if we are focusing on growth, if we're focusing on healing our past, if we're focusing on just being a better person, I honestly believe that yoga is just there to support us in all of those things. So thank you so
I
much for coming on.
agree. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks.